Welcome to Silicon Heartland Sessions, where we explore the people and ideas shaping the future of tech from the heart of the Midwest. In this episode, Srini Koushik, President AI and Sustainability at Rackspace Technology, challenges us to think critically about the tools we build. You'll hear Srini's candid take on the environmental cost of generative AI, the moral hazards of innovation, and why we need to ask, just because we can, should we? If you're wrestling with how to innovate responsibly in a fast-moving landscape, this episode is for you. Special thanks to our sponsors, Rackspace Technology, your multi-cloud and AI partner for enterprise transformation. Varonis, securing data, detecting threats, and preventing breaches. Trace3, bridging innovation and execution across the tech stack. And Sigma Computing, helping teams make data-driven decisions in real time. Let's get into the conversation.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say the thing that really resonates with me is, as much as you espouse the idea of being bold and making tough decisions and owning the decisions and owning those outcomes, you balance that out with this whole notion of listening and empathizing and relying on your team, relying on the input from others and listening to them and realizing, having the introspection to be able to realize that I'm going to be prone to my own biases, and by, including others in this decision making, or at least getting those data points, it helps to broaden my perspective to help me make sure that I'm making a wise decision. Because, sometimes the decisions are high stakes, and sometimes, we have imperfect data, and we have to make a decision, and we have to stand by that decision. So when you think about your team, obviously I imagine you put a lot of effort into making sure that you've got the right people in the right jobs. So when it comes to like cultivating talent, what methods do you use to identify and nurture potential in your team?
Yeah. Again, another great question. And my style has changed completely, right? Like, so if you, there's several people who still work for me who started with me at Nationwide, right? Who still keep following me, the different roles and others. And but the person that they saw for the 12 years I was there is not the person that's standing in front of you right now. And I'm proud of it, right? That what hasn't changed is the passion and the drive haven't changed. But I'm like, let's go take this hill. We've taken the hill. It's like, cool, move on. Let's go take to the next one. Right? You're not the guy who stops and smells the roses on that front, because it's part of that transformative mindset that you have and do that piece.
Right.
Earlier in my career, it was like you didn't even pay attention to it. You just said, keep going, right? And then if you had a team that, like, if you had somebody who was in the team saying, hey, Srini, we got to stop and kind of do this type of thing, I'd say, like, why are these guys trying to slow me down, right? Like, to go do that piece.
Right.
I have learned that like part of it is, like, since I'd say the midpoint of my career to now, like, the change that's happened is you walk in, the weaknesses are still the same, the strengths are still the same. People don't change, right? Or and sometimes, unless you really want to change some things, you're not going to change, right? But what's changed though is you look around, and I spend a lot more time. So in the earlier part of my career, if you looked at the teams that ended up reporting to me, more than 70%, 60-70% of them were either asked to leave or rotated out very quickly in the first 6 to 7 months. Now, 2 years later, 80% of the original team is still intact.
Wow.
Right? But that comes from sharing the why. Understanding the strengths of people. When I see someone, and I do have a few people on my team that are very, very good at recognizing people, you just kind of delegate it and go, like, look, I am not going to be the guy who identifies the opportunities to recognize it, but every meeting, feel free to bring it up and say, Srini, we need to do a celebration on this stuff. And others are like, I'll leverage you for it. So it's if you think about it, it's a diversity of thought on the team.
Right.
It is diversity of how you operate on it. And that's kind of what you build with the team after all of the experience that you talked about.
So you brought up the concept of diversity, and I'm curious. There's not that. When you think about the strongest teams, the highest
Mhm.
performing teams are those teams that are the most diverse
Mhm.
and the most, I would say, the most inclusive. What
Yeah.
practical steps do you take to ensure diversity and inclusion within your teams?
Well, I think it is extremely important. I know in some circles, like the whole concept of DEI is considered a negative thing, and others like my whole thing is like if you've spent time building high performing teams, then you recognize that diversity of thought is important because if everyone
Right.
thinks the same, you're going to have a dictatorship. You're going to have something that may have one or two successes, but it's not sustainable.
Right.
Um, Diversity of thought is important because you need people who can speak their mind, can bring different perspectives to the table. And
Yeah.
when you think about how different perspectives are generated and how different perspectives are developed, it comes from having different backgrounds. It
Yeah.
comes from, if I worked for an insurance company, hiring somebody who was not worked in insurance, that's diversity of thought.
Right.
If I am running a global team and I've got 200 people in India, um, having a leader in the US, manage that entire team doesn't give you the entire diversity. It doesn't matter if they're Indian or not. You don't live there. You don't have the same context that they do. You don't have to get into the same traffic they do to get into work, right?
Very
And
true.
so having diverse perspectives on a team makes the team much stronger. And
Hmm.
in order to get those diverse perspectives, you have to take specific actions around this piece. We had a team in India. We have a team in India that is very strong, but I took over the IT functions within Rackspace about a year ago. And first thing you notice is there's no senior leaders there.
Mm.
So what do? We went back in, we've hired a couple of senior leaders, we've kind of taken them and put them into the management chain, right? And said, okay, so your job is to make sure that that whatever we're talking about is like the team there understands it, buys into the mission and other types of things, right? Because we
Right.
may talk fun and like we've all listened to the same Simon Sinek and others, but they may have never heard of them, right? And so we got to establish that common language, you got to
I love
establish
it.
that common purpose.
Well, and to your point, you talk a lot about the important qualities of listening and
Yeah,
empathizing, and creating a growth mindset from
yeah,
a leadership perspective. And you need to make sure that the right leaders are in the right place who are best equipped to be able to empathize
right.
and to really understand the breadth of the life experiences
Mm-hmm.
that the diverse folks in your team
Yeah.
have.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and that I think
that makes a lot of
when you
sense.
approach inclusion and diversity from that vantage point, you're only going to build fantastic teams, right? There's no specific quota you're trying to fill or something like that. It happens automatically, right?
Right, right.
And and the organizations are better for it.
Totally agree. So we've talked a lot about personal and professional development. We've talked a lot about leadership, your philosophy, your life philosophy. This has been very, very enriching. I know you're very, very passionate about technology. You mind if we transition a little bit and
Sure,
talk a little bit of tech?
sure.
So let's start with emerging tech. It's something I'm very passionate about. I know you're very passionate about. How do you see emerging technology shaping the world in the next 5 to 10 years, and maybe discuss specific technologies that might revolutionize things like sustainability practices and reflecting your commitment to responsible AI.
Yeah. Well, I think emerging technology is such a broad thing, right? So I
True.
follow tech. If I start from there, if I follow tech from a sustainability standpoint, and I'm excited about a lot of the sustainability the techniques that are emerging, right?
Mhm.
Um, reusable plastics, better recycling techniques. Again, we've got the mess that we do have, right, with the plastics and water pollution and other types of things. Like you can complain about it, blame it on previous generations and others, or start looking at ways to kind of solve the mess that we're in right now. And I think those technologies I'm excited to see, because if you kind of think about tech is evolving in all of these spaces. Sustainability. I'll come to IT and AI, but in sustainability, there's so much great technology that's coming in, where the where today, if you ask me, I'd say the issue is with people's behaviors, right? It's not with the tech.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I do this all the
Agreed.
time. It's like you look around. I got like 6 bulbs going on here, but all of them are LED bulbs. It was
Mm-hmm.
we bought the house, we came in, went through the whole thing, like 65, 70 bulbs, like a ton of money, just changing the LED bulbs, right? And
There you go.
then we changed out the switches so that when I would leave the room, it automatically shuts it off, right? Like, and again, you why do I bring that up? I think the tech already existed. The LED tech, all of that stuff already existed. It was the human behavior that needed to change. Right?
Right.
The more that you understand and the more that you can actually change that, it's better. And I think it's the same thing with IT and sustainability, right? Greener technology already exists today. Greener technology already exists today to build better things, whether it's cloud computing and how you leverage cloud. But in order to do that, I know you and I have talked about it in the past, you've got to take sustainability and make it a non-functional requirement for IT.
Right.
We talk about
Well said.
security, availability, everything else as non-functional requirements, and how you architect systems to do that. Sustainability should be a non-functional requirement. And you can do that
Totally
starting
agree.
today. Right?
Right.
And that starts to guide architectural decisions back to human behavior and how do you leverage the tech. Because you have to trust that the tech is going to keep evolving as long as there's people using it, right? Because it's the capitalistic society. Like, when you see people using it, more is going to go into it, and then you're going to drive that piece, right? So I think that's important.
Well,
When
and
it comes to AI, the same.
the
Yeah.
example that you
Go ahead.
gave was interesting. You said you went throughout your house, you changed all the light bulbs and so forth, but then also installed technology to automate the turning off of lights when you leave the room.
Right.
So when you
Right.
think about, the same thing applies in tech as well, whether it's cloud computing or artificial intelligence, whatever, automation, because at the end of the day, we're still human. We're still fallible. We're still going to make mistakes. You've got daughters at home, you've got a wife, you've got kids. Same thing here. You can't expect to instill a rule in your house that, okay, when you leave a room, shut the light off.
Yeah.
I mean, it'll work some of the time. It's not going to work all the time.
Right.
Automation, when done right, works every time.
That's a fantastic point, right? Like, and again, the equivalent of that, in cloud computing is like, number one, I can make a choice to take a workload and move it into the cloud, right?
Right.
And by the way, that itself is maybe a good choice because, first of all, more efficient data centers, more cleaner power sources, all of that other stuff. That's a good choice in the first place. But then for a development team to say, like, look, Saturday, Sundays, we don't work, so shut it down before you go, right? Shut down our environments before you go. That is automation, right? And that's kind of what we have done. I think, yeah, it's spot on. This is why, like, I think it's important that we trust the tech and essentially be able to do things that take advantage of what we've already got today, right? And that's the same thing I would say on when it gets to AI, right?
Yeah.
And one of the tenets, like when we launched Responsible AI, we said it needs to do 3 things, right? 3 things. First of all, for AI to be responsible, it needs to exist symbiotically with human beings, right? Because if I'm building AI to replace human beings, then it's like, what's the point, right? Like, at some point, then what do human beings do and other types of things? So it has to coexist, right? Symbiotic with human beings. That's the first S. The second one is it has to be safe and secure, right? Because if you're going to put something in, if it doesn't take care of the safety, the security of the individual, then it's not responsible, right? And so it's number 2. And then number 3 is that the third S is sustainable, right? And sustainable to me is if you actually build solutions that drive income inequality even farther. If you actually build solutions that, again, I know this, and like it's public information already. I'm one of those guys, like in responsible AI. If we get a chance, if we've had a couple of opportunities to go after deals for cryptocurrency companies. I've
Hmm.
said no. Right? That's not a that's not a value judgment on whether crypto is going to be relevant in the future or not.
Hmm.
It's more of if AI is going to consume this much power, do we use it for the good of this, or do we actually go out and use it for things that may benefit as a smaller segment of the people? And the answer is no, right? Like, and so the responsible AI component of it is a big part of figuring out, because if you just take it at face value, AI is power hungry. It's a
Hmm.
net new add to the whole thing. It's not green at all, right? To do that, but if
Very
you can
true.
do it in such a way that it actually balances, helps humanity, helps sustain economic viability and those types of things, then I think you get to the right place. So it's always I'm a huge believer in tech, and I think tech is always going to be there to solve something. And if it's not there today, give it another 3 months, it'll be there. Right?
Right.
So
I'm with you, man.
assume that that's going to happen. The question is, how do you use it?
Right.
Right? And
So, and so the interesting thing, and I've been wanting to pull this thread. So when we were talking automation and sustainability and so forth, you use the phrase trust the technology.
yeah.
And I agree with you. Now, when we're talking artificial intelligence, do you trust that technology?
I trust the tech. I don't trust the people who created it.
Very
There's
well
a
said.
distinction. Yeah, there's a distinction, right? The tech is going to do, see, at the core of it, it's still the same neural networks that are built. It's going to learn different things. It's a question of how it has been trained. So I don't trust the people who trained it. It's very important. And
Right.
you and I have talked in the past, and I said, like, look, it's very important that for an organization to make sure that the people that you're working with on AI share your values.
Mm-hmm.
Share your values as an organization, as a company, and those things, because I think that's the biggest thing that can get you into trouble. Because if you
Right.
blindly go and pick something, I've also been one of the first to kind of talk about, you've got to start thinking of AI as a coworker and an employee in your
Agreed.
organization. And why is that important? When I hire an employee today, Sean, what do? I go do background checks, right? I go,
Mm-hmm.
these days, depending on the state, you don't do drug tests, but you did background tests, you did drug tests, you did all of those things, because you're bringing somebody into the fabric of an
Right.
organization, and you want to
Yep.
make sure that that individual, uh, fits in with the culture. And it's why you
Right.
do all those interviews and others.
Yeah. And to your
You got to treat
point,
AI
when
the
it
same way.
what
You got to treat AI yeah. If no judgment here. I'm just saying, if you're saying I want to bring in Microsoft Copilot, right? So all I'm asking is, like, just make sure that you vetted it like you're bringing an employee in. It's not just a pure technology decision
mm-hmm.
of it's going to cost me $30 per person per month. That
Yeah.
is important, but what is it going to be used for? What data is it trained on? What
Precisely.
yeah,
And
what model?
that's what I was gonna probe on for
Yeah.
those enterprises and those companies that are working to bring AI into
Mhm.
their ecosystem. And they're doing it through this responsible lens of
Yeah.
thinking about it in terms of, hey, I'm bringing this as an like another piece of my workforce is
Mhm.
this AI capability. I'm of the opinion, and challenge me and correct me, but I'm
Yeah.
of the opinion when it comes to this technology, the technology is moving so quickly, and the regulators are not keeping up.
Mhm.
And what's happened is we now have all of these models, thousands of models that have been trained on data. And these models, let's talk about OpenAI's model, ChatGPT. These model or whatever, they've been trained on data, and these models are proprietary, but we have no transparency into what data they've been trained on, what biases, what sort of misinformation, discrimination, et cetera, are in those data sets. And I know that they talk about some of the things that they do in terms of fine tuning and so forth to try to eliminate those biases. But to your point, how do you accurately vet an AI to make sure that what you're bringing in is what is being advertised when all of the most popular models are proprietary in nature, and you really have no transparency into the data sets that they were trained on?
It's a question that you wrestle with every single day. Like pushing back on it, I think absolutely you're thinking about it the right way. Um, and just like with everything else, you're not going to have black and white answers. But here's what I'd say: like one of the benefits of open source versus closed source is you actually know what data it's getting trained on. That is definitely one of the controls you got to kind of think about when you're bringing in, when you're thinking of bringing in. Like, first of all, you always start with the why. Why are you trying to do AI? Like, I mean, we can get past the board wanted to see a demo, like got it done. But again, now why are we trying to do AI? Right? Within the organization,
it always goes back to why.
yeah. You go through that piece, but once you get there, I think the how matters. The how, like the reality is, you want to make sure that you leverage something that is that has been trained using data that like they're very visible and open with you as to what's being trained. And again, without mentioning names, some things are classified under open, but when you look at the way they train it, it's really not open. Right? And there are others that are open. They'll tell you what data it's being trained on. But I think that's only step one. Step two, you actually mentioned this. I think this is where the whole buy versus build is going to keep evolving, because how far up that chain do you want to trust an outside person to be able to do that piece versus what you do? So am I going to build my own enterprise inference? Because everything you're talking about with fine tuning and prompt engineering and others that I can do to kind of make sure that I eliminate the biases on that front, and build that, is something you can build within your enterprise inference. Right? You're still leveraging an open source model on the outside, but my enterprise inference is built and fine tuned to the point where it is reflecting who I am and who we are as an organization. Right? You could do that, right? But in order to do that, it comes back to it's just surprising how everything comes back to it's well architected solutions, right? If you're just going to run through and put that in place, just imagine if you're using a large language model as prevalently as CrowdStrike was deployed, and something bad happens in that space, right? In terms of answer, there's injection of this into the model where it starts to spit out wrong answers, and you're completely dependent on that.
Yep.
The whole enterprise risk landscape changes, right? So I think that for me to tie it back from a tech standpoint, what's exciting about the tech is what's good and what's not. But advocating and being one of those guys who was fighting on the good guys' side to implement it, right? Not run away from it. Because I've said this in public forums as well. The only thing that's guaranteed, if you kind of sulk away from all of if everyone says all of this, fake images and everything else that are coming out, all the doomsday scenario, the only thing we can guarantee if we kind of stop is the bad guys will win, because they're not stopping. They're not stopping. They're actually using all of this technology. They're evolving in others. And unless you have enough people on the responsible AI side pushing it in the right direction, the bad guys are always going to be a step ahead, right?
There you go.
So that's the reason to kind of do this. It's the reason to that you get smart people recruited into the mission so that we are building the future that we want to live in.
I love it. And it all comes back to the technology is going to continue to evolve.
Yeah.
And as you've said over and over again, engage.
Yeah.
Be a leader. Make sure that we have crystal clarity in terms of the why. And presumably your why is always going to be born out of making the world a better place for our kids, for the
doing
world,
my part, right? Doing my part, right? I'm not no illusions of grandeur, but if you can take a moral path towards doing the right things based on your values, then I think you've done the best you can, right? And hopefully you inspire other people to kind of follow, and so you have something that is tangible.
Thanks again for listening to Silicon Heartland Sessions. If this topic resonated with you, be sure to follow and share with your network. And as always, a heartfelt thank you to Rackspace, Varonis, Trace3, and Sigma Computing for supporting our mission.